Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, a Dave Roberts extension possibly coming. Clayton Kershaw finally speaks, and a little bit about free agency. So make sure to keep it Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is a daily podcast covering the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. I'm Vince Samperio, Chevezerine Fiends, and I will be solo on today's episode. Jeff will be solo on tomorrow's episode. Let's see who rounds up Keith Law. But we are here, and we're here to talk about the Dodgers. We got not really news, but a little bit of tidbits here and there. Dave Roberts' potential extension. Clayton Kershaw was on the radio and had some things to say. And then just one of the things stemming from Roberts' article about an extension will be part of the last segment. But before we get into all that, just want to thank you and remind you to make Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube, and all for free, and can't get much better than that. So Dave Roberts' article in Athletic by Andy McCullough, and it says that they will talk about an extension in the coming weeks. Dave Roberts says, I quote, "It'll get done. It'll get done." And Jeff and I talked about this a few weeks ago. Should Dave Roberts get an extension? Should he not? We both were in favor of him getting an extension. Jeff and I both had separate issues, maybe me a little more than him, about Roberts' actual in-game management. But we both agreed that the overall management of the clubhouse and the locker room and everything else is that much more important when you have a team like the Dodgers. And it's one of those things where the grass isn't always greener. I don't know if I could come up with a manager off the top of my head that I would really want. A lot of people like Joe Madden and wanted him last year. I've never really been a fan of Joe Madden like that, or at least not recently. And it's a matter of there's nobody else out there that's suitable and perfect for this job at this moment. Now, could somebody come up in the future? Yeah, for sure. Can somebody, surprise like Dave Roberts surprise? Probably, but as of right now, there's no reason to go away from Dave Roberts. He's led the Dodgers to the playoffs every year that he's been here. He's led them to 3 World Series. They should have won 2 of them, and it's just a matter of how many years they want to give him. It's more. This is more of a respect. Obviously, I think the Dodgers want to keep Dave Roberts around, but I don't know. Like, if they give him a 4-year extension or a 3-year extension and he doesn't win a World Series in that time frame, and it's not because of like injuries or some crazy event, do they want to keep him around longer than that? It's a matter of, how long do you keep a guy before you think that there's like an issue. If you're not winning World Series championships and you have the team to win World Series championships. But it's also a thing of respect. This Dave Roberts has earned a contract extension. You shouldn't let him manage this season without one. And even if something happened and you extend him 3-4 years and he doesn't make it those 3-4 years, it's still, a sign of respect and thank you for what he's done rather than exactly what he's going to do. But as far as we've seen, what he's going to do is manage a locker room and keep guys happy, or at least happy-ish, to where they're not, distracting the team. He's going to do things that a lot of managers don't have to deal with. When you have a team like the Dodgers where there's a lot of talent and not as many spots to fill, sometimes talent that would probably be better served being an everyday player or something to that nature somewhere else. They end up serving, different roles here, and he's done a good job of that. And from what we've seen, however you want to think about it, but like Jock Peterson wanted to test free agency, wanted to see what it would be like to be an everyday player, and 1 year out, and by the middle of the season, he was already a platoon player once again. So Kike Hernandez probably for him was a very successful season. He was an everyday player. And, it's not like he didn't have the chances with the Dodgers here. So it's just a matter of guys that want to try things out. But the big part is that you never heard any complaints. You never heard any like that. And, we kind of compared it to the Padres this past season. The talent was there to at least be a playoff team. We both didn't think that they would really give a Dodgers a true run for the division, at least not like the Giants did beating them for the division. But they had the talent to be a playoff team at the very least, second wild card at the very least, and they imploded. And now they have a new manager, Bob Melvin, over there, who should help at least in the locker room, clubhouse part of it. The on-field talent remains to be seen because of different things, but all that to say that Dave Roberts deserves this extension. And other parts of the article that were not interesting, but just Dave Roberts reflecting and him saying that he wants to help the Dodgers get where they want to go. Obviously, that's what he would be hired for. He also mentioned the fact of he says, I have no problem taking the heat for decisions in game or things that happen in games that we lose. He recalls the conversation he had with Tommy Lasorda that he basically said, when you win, the players get all the love, and when you lose, you get all the hate. And that's kind of how it's been. I mean, I don't think the Dodgers, like Dodger fans, at least the vocal ones on social media, have blamed the players as much as they blame Dave Roberts. Obviously, there's been some situations where, Roberts made a decision that even I didn't agree with. But at the end of the day, like, I'm more liable to blame the players if we're not scoring runs. If the Dodgers were scoring 5 runs every game, and then Dave Roberts just happened to do something that went away from that or got away from that being a winning formula, then that would make sense. But I mean, at the end of the day, the players are the ones on the field, and for the most part, they could do better jobs of putting managers in easier positions if they really wanted to. So, or if they, I'm more of the share the blame around wherever it needs to be rather than just blame one person. But we'll see. Dave Roberts, it seems like we'll have an extension before the season starts, whenever that is. And that's a good thing for the Dodgers. That's a good thing for Los Angeles. And that's a good thing for the fans, despite how maybe some of you may think it's not. All right, going to talk about Clayton Kershaw and just a couple of things that he said in an interview. But before, let's talk about Built Bar. Built Bar, the best tasting protein bar in the world. And now they have Built Bar Puffs. If you haven't tried these, you're missing out on one of the best tasting Built Bars. This is true. The puffs are really good. They're the first ever protein infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're like a marshmallow, and they're not a protein bar. They're not just a protein bar, but they're a treat. This legit could be like a dessert, and it's covered in chocolate. Basically, a chocolate covered marshmallow with flavor. They have a churro one that is super bomb, coconut marshmallow, really good, banana cream pie, bunch of different flavors, just like Built Bars, but these are a little bit puffier and taste really great like marshmallow. But they still have the same great macros: low calorie, low carb, low sugar, high protein, high fiber, everything you could want. Better than a candy bar. Tastes just as good as a candy bar. So for right now, go to built.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you can get 15% off your order. That's promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at built.com. All right, it is Super Week, and it's brought to you by Get Upside. And there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than the Locked On NFL podcast, along with Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams, who've been in LA all week covering the big game. If you are a Rams fan, check out Locked On Rams. If you are not a Rams fan, then if you're a Bengals fan, check out Locked On Bengals. If you just want to talk football, Locked On NFL, everything got you covered. Check it out. And let's talk about Clayton Kershaw. Clayton Kershaw was in, I think, the Dan Patrick show, and was talking about a few things. And he actually talked about something we talked about not too long ago about his friendship with Matt Stafford. And he said that, yeah, like they're not the best of friends, that they're friends they played growing up. And that was the main takeaway for me, because that's kind of what we talked about. But Clayton Kershaw will be at the Super Bowl. He said that he will be in seats rather than the suite and that he didn't ask Stafford for tickets. He said he went through the Rams and bought some tickets. He's excited. So that's cool that Kershaw will be there watching his childhood friend. And I think he said they asked him more about Stafford and kind of the parallels in their career. Stafford was been in the playoffs 3 times, didn't do it. Kershaw been in the playoffs 3 times, couldn't win it, and now he's in a position to win it. And he says, and Kershaw says something that's true, and that I don't know. I don't know if he'll get heat for it. I doubt it. Or this type of mentality, but he says, I'll say this 1,000 times. I would much rather continue to have success and fall and fail over and over again, but continue to get there. And that's what a lot of arguments like don't make sense to me. If you're in the playoffs every year, yeah, you're gonna fail sometimes. That's just the nature of it. There's not dynasties that win 3, 4, 5 titles. The Patriots in the NFL are maybe the closest in recent years, but even then they weren't winning back to back. They win every other year, every couple of years, whatever the case is. I think they only won them back to back once. In Major League Baseball, there hasn't been back to back winners since the 99 2000. So it's a matter of what else do you want? You want to get there, right? And if you're helping your team get there every year, and yeah, sometimes you're going to fail when you do get to that point, but at the end of the day, you're there, and that's just a matter of there's a lot of great players that face that type of mentality from fans, like, oh, LeBron gets it. He's lost in the NBA Finals a bunch of times. That also means he made the NBA Finals a bunch of times. He was one of the best 2 teams almost half of his career, or more than half of his career. That where is the shame in that? Clayton Kershaw's been the best pitcher in baseball for a number of years. He was in the playoffs a bunch of times. Led the Dodgers to the playoffs. There's a few years where they wouldn't make the playoffs if they didn't have Clayton Kershaw. And yeah, did he struggle sometimes in the playoffs? Yeah, but like we talked about the other day, he also did really good in the playoffs a few times and doesn't get the credit for that because, ultimately either the Dodgers didn't end up winning some of those years or whatever the case is, or maybe had another start after that just didn't quite live up to what his expectations were. But you're there. I'd rather get there and we talked about this. I'd rather be in the playoffs every single year than win one time and never be in the playoffs again. So just wanted to break on that mentality. And then the thing that struck me the most about Kershaw, I did talk about MLB lockout. He said just check the wording on this. He says, at this point, it's February 9th. There's no way we're going to be in spring training in a week, but I hope we're in spring training soon so we can get the season started on time because ultimately that's the goal. Now, why is that interesting? Clayton Kershaw is not on a team currently. He doesn't have a contract with a team. I know what he means by he hopes to be spring training to start soon, but I wonder if this means that once spring training or once the lockout is over, Kershaw already knows what he's going to do or what he wants to do. Because if he wants to be in spring training soon and already to get ready for the season, you would think that as soon as that season opens up, as soon as this lockout is over, he'd be on a team because he needs to be in spring training getting ready for the season. Hopefully that's with the Dodgers. I don't know, the way this interview, the way I've seen different quotes pulled from different people. Matt Moreno did from Dodger Blue did a good job of pulling out some of the best stuff. A couple other people did on Twitter, and it just seems like Clayton Kershaw's still on the Dodgers, and that's how when you read it, you're like, oh yeah, you just assume he's already on the Dodgers, even though he's not. The one other funny thing from it is that he says he has to get his lockout updates from Walker Buehler, who's the Dodgers union rep now. Kershaw used to be the union rep, but he's technically not on the Dodgers anymore. And he said he passed the baton. So he gets updates from Buehler, but as far as the day-to-day, I'm not involved in times at all. And, Walker Buehler's a smart guy, so I would imagine that his updates would be fulfilling, but it's just, Walker Buehler's also the guy that pulls off twist-offs with his teeth. So it's Kershaw's probably asking a bunch of questions or trying to figure things out. And, I don't know how deep Buehler is in it. I don't know if he's a rep that is, I don't know, 100% in it and whatever the case, or if he's a rep that just kind of gets the details and shares it. I don't know, but it's just funny that Kershaw has to go through Bueller to figure out some of this stuff. So, but that was really it from Kershaw. He's not Stafford's best friend. He is going to the Super Bowl. He wants spring training to start soon, and he has to get his updates from Walker Bueller. So that's all from Kershaw. Hopefully, like I said, once the lockout is over, he signs with the Dodgers and everything will be right in the world again. But that remains to be seen. But I think we'll be fine with it. We're going to talk about free agency. One thing that was brought up by one of our favorite writers from The Athletic, and then one other thing from Dave Roberts' interview that we'll talk about. But before, let's talk about Bet Online. Bet Online has you covered this season with more props, more odds, and more lines than ever before as football heads to the big game in just a few days. BetOnline.net remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just football. BetOnline has up-to-the-minute info on pro and college hoops, NHL, boxing, UFC, along with live real-time updates of current games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the new amazing offers available for the 2022 season. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so one thing in that Dave Roberts article that was talked about free agency, kind of. He did say that he says, quote, I might have been on the phone with the potential free agent to let him know how much we want to have him, Roberts said. I'll leave it at that. So I don't know. I guess he can talk to free agents. Technically, they're not on his team. So this can be taken a few ways. Obviously, people wanted to run away with Freddie Freeman, and I hope it's Freddie Freeman. But also leaning into the next part is it might be someone else. And Jim Bowden from The Athletic, a guy that we've used his ideas for the Dodgers plenty of times to mostly ridicule because they don't make sense. And I'm not going to ridicule this idea, but he wrote an article, the first move each team should make when the lockout ends. And his move is sign closer Kenley Jansen to a 2-year, $40 million deal. Now, technically, Kenley Jansen is a free agent. Dave Roberts could have been talking about Kenley Jansen since he already has his contact information. I hope it's Freddie Freeman more so than the Dodgers don't need either Freddie Freeman or Kenley Jansen, but I'd rather them have Freddie Freeman than Kenley Jansen. So, yeah, 2 years, $40 million. Nah. Kenley Jansen might get that. He might get money like that, 15, 20 million a year. I don't think it's going to be from the Dodgers. And realistically, it just doesn't make sense for the Dodgers to do that. They just signed Daniel Hudson. They have Blake Trinan. They have Bruce Gratterall. They have guys that have either been closers or are maybe looking to be called upon to be a closer in the future. They're also getting Tommy Kahnle back, I would assume. We haven't seen any updates, but I would assume he's fine. Getting Caleb Ferguson back. You had Vesia and Phil Bigford, who stepped up last year. And then you're going to have probably some arms that fall from the rotation or some younger arms that could fill bullpen spots. So to spend $20 million a year, even if it's just 2 years for Kenley Jansen, just doesn't quite make sense. Now, I do think there's a path to him being back with the Dodgers, but I don't think it's at anything above $15 million a year. And if he would basically have to take a pay cut, I think he can get 15, 20 million a year from somebody. I think he'd have to take a pay cut to be with the Dodgers. I don't know if he wants to do that. He mentioned that, he has one more. This is kind of his last chance at one more payday. He was linked to the Phillies. He was linked to the Marlins. I'm sure there's other teams that might, feel the pressure to sign a closer once the lockout ends just because we are so close to spring training. So, yeah, Bowden, however you say your name. I don't think that's what the Dodgers are going to do. They're definitely not going to do it for that much money. Yeah, their first move might be signing Kenley Jansen, but it won't be for 2 years, $40 million. And I'm not going to guarantee that, but I'm just pretty sure. Now, speculating more on the Dave Roberts part, being on the phone with a potential free agent, it's basically the two big free agent names that could come to the Dodgers, Carlos Correa and Freddie Freeman. Very differing opinions on on those two players for sure by fans and kind of by need, and it's a matter of. I think the Carlos Correa thing is a matter of if the Dodgers will be like, okay, we talked to Trey Turner, we don't think we're going to re-sign him. Let's set up the future at shortstop, and Trey Turner can play second base for the year. I don't think it's going to happen, but like I said, it could very well. The Dodgers could be like, you know what, we don't have a legitimate shortstop prospect coming up, right? That's going to be ready for the next 2-3 years. Gavin Lux could be that guy, but has yet to show the consistency at the plate to be that guy. So, how do you fix that? You sign one of the top shortstops in baseball. But I don't think it's going to happen. But I do think it was more of a possibility than it was before. But Freddie Freeman, we've talked about Freddie Freeman a lot, and I'm going to talk about him a little more because we saw Heyman tweeted the other day about the Yankees going to pursue him once they get out of it. We saw some reports that the Braves had not planned for the Freddie Freeman leaving, but had kind of already started looking at some backup plans in the case that he does leave. They talked with the A's about Matt Olson, and they kicked around some other things that if he happened to leave, this is what could happen. And I don't know, man. It just seems like to me, like Kershaw and the Dodgers, you could be like, oh, well, the Dodgers didn't sign Kershaw. That means they didn't really want him. We don't know what those negotiations have been like. We haven't heard any number that Clayton Kershaw wants. We haven't heard any number that the Dodgers offered. We haven't heard anything. We don't even know if Kershaw said, I want to come back yet. Now, obviously, with what he said in the other interview with Dan Patrick, he's coming back, but we hadn't even heard about that yet. Now, Freddie Freeman, obviously, when things get leaked, it's for a reason, but we've seen what the Braves have offered. Theoretically, we've seen what Freddie Freeman wants. They just won a World Series championship thanks to a lot of things that Freddie Freeman did. Freddie Freeman's got to feel some type of way. Like he wasn't asking for the world. He wasn't asking for some ridiculous amount of money or anything. He maybe like it came down to like what the extra year. Sometimes you gotta just do extra years. You gotta do a couple extra years to keep what it is. Is Mookie Betts going to be an MVP caliber player throughout this entire Dodger contract? Hopefully, but realistically, probably not. But if he's an MVP candidate for the first half of that contract and then just a solid player the next few years, and then maybe not as good the last couple of years, that's still a win in that book. So for me, if I'm Freddie Freeman and I'm feeling some type of way and I have the Yankees and the Dodgers pursuing me, I'd be scared if I was the Braves or a Braves fan, because even though I personally don't think he's going to leave the Braves, as me as a fan of the Dodgers and fan of baseball, the possibility is still there, and it wasn't there before. Like it was always a matter of, oh yeah, Freddie Freeman's going to stay with the Braves. Now it's like, oh wait, is Freddie going to stay with the Braves? And that's all you really need. Open the door, and honestly, the Dodgers have the money. If they wanted to just say, here's your 6 years, we'll throw in another $10 million on top of that and come play for us, I think they could do that very easily. Well, they could do that very easily. And then also it depends what happened with the new CBA. I mean, if the luxury tax gets upped like the players want it, then even more so throw some money at Freddie Freeman. But or if another matter, if it's a thing like we couldn't work, we talked to Trey Turner's people. I don't think an extension is going to happen before the season. We don't know if he'd want to stay after the season. We can lock down Freddie Freeman. That pushes Muncy to second. That gives you Lux and Taylor to play short in the potential future if you don't get anybody else. And then, or, Taylor to third, Lux to short. You'll have guys coming up eventually in the next few years. So it's not, first base isn't a position of need, but with the flexibility that Max Muncy gives you, it could be a position of flexibility. And with the universal DH probably coming, That's another thing. You can always put Muncy DH if you end up filling out the rest of your infield. If Freddie Freeman somehow declines and toward the back half of that contract, but he's still a hitter, you can move him to DH. So, all in all, to say, I hope Dave Roberts was on the phone with Freddie Freeman. I hope that when free agency ends within the next 3 days, the Dodgers sign Freddie Freeman, and we can all be happy and head into spring training with big smiles on our faces rather than just the normal smiles on our faces we already have. So, Freddie, I know you don't listen to this podcast, but if you do, hit me up if you need more convincing. I got you. I know you're from here, but I got you with whatever you need, and let's make this happen. And with that, that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Jeff will be on tomorrow. He's still trying to lock down Keith Law, but if not, he will talk about what Rob Manfred says in his press conference. And anytime Jeff has to talk about Rob Manfred, hilarity ensues. So make sure to check out tomorrow's episode. Now make your second listen of the day Locked On Bets. Locked On Bets is your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. Hosted by your boy Q with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get podcasts. If you want to find us, go to Locked On Dodgers wherever you find podcasts. Go to YouTube, Locked On Dodgers. If you want to find us on social media, we are on Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snider. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are always open on those accounts if you need to get hold of us. You can also get a hold of us via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. Take your smart device, play a podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.